The WSK Supermaster series opens its season from the International Circuit of Naples in Sarno. More than 210 drivers from over 20 countries in the world will race each other to conquer the prestigious 2014 trophies. They will be divided into 4 categories: Mini 60, KF Junior, KF and KZ. 4 categories which will surely show us the peak performances of the best drivers throughout the 3 events in the WSK calendar: Sarno, Castelletto's 7 Lakes Circuit and La Conca Circuit in Muro Leccese. Before the first green lights turn off though, let us give you a taste of last year's gala event that crowned 2013 champions. After a long free trial session, the qualifications will finally start to skim through the qualified ranks of the drivers. In the Mini 60, the Baby Race team manages to place 2 of his pilots in the top 2 positions of the ranking. Nicola Abruzzi, in fact, manages to conquer the pole position a few laps from the end, while Marzio Moretti gets the second time 222 milliseconds behind Abruzzi. Both of them are on Tony Kart. Skid manages to conquer a 3rd place ahead of Christian Corbellini, Ivan Grigoriev and Mattia Müller. In KF Junior, Giuliano Raucci was the fastest, managing to take his energy kart in pole position. Only 50 milliseconds behind the Brazilian driver, we can find the American Delvin De Francesco on a Tony Kart, and 34 milliseconds after him, the English Daniel Ticknam on Zanardi. This is a very good start, and we hope that the category will be as balanced and entertaining as it has been until now. Amazingly, in fact, the first 47 drivers ended up being in 919 milliseconds time span. The same music goes for main category, that is, the KF. Its qualifications managed to keep more than 10 teams on the edge of their seats. Eventually, the Indian Jihan Daruvala confirms his professional growth by snatching the pole position ahead of the Danish veteran Niklas Nielsen and the always performing Alessio Lorandi, 3rd. Among the best times we can find the Polish Bas, the English Ilot and the Finnish Kari. Finally, the KZ2, the category for the most experienced pilots, and for this reason, one of the hardest. Flavio Campaneschi and Marco Ardigo were among the most performing during the qualifications. 2 pilots of the Tony Kart fought until the checker flag flapped above their heads, giving the first pole of the season to Campaneschi, just before Ardigo, for only 125 milliseconds. Andrea Daré, the French Arnaud Kozlinski, the Belgian Rick Tresi, Riccardo Negro and Paolo De Conto also qualified high enough to present a challenge to the top 2 positions. Three were the qualifying hits for the young drivers of the Mini 60. In the first one, Giuseppe Fusco flawlessly managed to keep the pack of pursers at bay, winning by a wide margin of more than a second and a half on Marzio Moretti and Ivan Grigoriev, who took 2nd and 3rd place respectively. In the second round, Nicola Abruzzi conquered his first success with a gap of almost a second on Abdul Ghaffar and Dennis Holger. In the third round, Giuseppe Fusco managed to beat Nicola Abruzzi by a scant 297 milliseconds, letting us know that the 2 pre-finals will be hot. There is no certainty whatsoever over the KF Junior qualification heats. This is mainly due to the fact that the candidates for victory struck a perfect balance on the track. With 3 victories, the British Enam Ahmed is the center of the attention. Nonetheless, he will have to face his fellow countrymen Max Futrell and Daniel Ticktum, who, together with the American Francesco Devlin, collected 2 victories. The last serious contender for the podium is Leonardo Lorandi. In the Premier class, experience seems to be the discriminating element for the final standings. The Danish Niklas Nielsen, the Polish Karol Bast and the English Callum Ilott are among the suitors of the first final of the season. The trio, of course, will have to take into account the hope and grit of the Finnish Nico Kari, of the English Ole Norris, and especially of the Italian Alessio Lorandi, who recorded 2 victories in 2 qualification rounds. Finally, the KZ confirmed the results of the qualifications. In fact, Flavio Camponeschi choked down 3 victories over 4 rounds, and is now ahead of the champion Marco Ardicot and the French Kozlinski in the general standings. While the qualifications took place on a dry track, both the pre-final and the finals had to be brought out in the rain. The final phases of the event became even more exciting than what we had foreseen. During the pre-final A of the Mini 60, 2 drivers took part in a spectacular duel that awarded the victory to the young Makar Medzevic, who managed to wrestle the first position from Giuseppe Fusco, only 18 milliseconds behind. Davide Vidale will be third. Also, pre-final B was able to make hearts pound restlessly when the final dash gave victory to Nicola Bruschi, who won on Mattia Müller for a mere 166 milliseconds. In third place, the Swiss Robin Führer. There were 2 pre-finals for the KF Junior Tour. During the first one, the British Daniel Ticktum led the ranks of drivers and triumphed on his Zanardi by winning over the Belgian Benjamin Lessens and the compatriot Max Futrell. In the pre-final B, the Russian pilot Matvei Maslov won, being able to defeat Leonardo Lorandi and the Belgian Matteo Raspatelli. The excitement was destined not to finish soon anyway, because during the pre-finals on the KF category, the English Tom Joyner conquered the first place for pre-final A, just ahead of the Danish Niklas Nielsen on Cosmic and his teammate, the Englishman Callum Ilott on Zanardi. In the pre-final B, the Polish Karol Bast dominated the race and won by more than 4 seconds over the second driver, the Russian Nikita Mazepin, and on the third one, the Dutchman Martin van Lowen. There was a sudden turn of events in the pre-final A of the KZ category, where the strongest of suitors, Flavio Camponeschi, was forced to retire due to a mechanical failure. The race was won by the Dutchman Bas Lammers, who preceded the French Arnaud Kozlinski and the Englishman Benjamin Hanley. On the other hand, Marco Ardicot managed to vanquish his opponents during pre-final B, ahead of the Belgian Rick Dreesen and the Italian Paolo De Conto. A wet circuit and a dark omen of a rainy afternoon. This is the bleak scenario that the drivers of the Mini 60 witnessed upon deployment on the grid for the Mini 60 final. The pole position is taken by the Tony kart of Makar Medzevic, sided by Nicola Bruschi, also on a Tony kart. Second row is occupied by Giuseppe Fusco on Lenza kart and by Mattia Müller, also on Lenza kart. When the race starts, Vidales takes command on the long straight leading to the second bend, where the too wide trajectory of his kart makes it impossible for him to defend his position from the attacks of Marcel Zisco, who takes the lead. Once in first position, Zisco tries to open a gap with his opponents. He definitely plays a risky game, but it's a rewarding one, because nonetheless, he manages to keep his adversaries behind him. First 2, we can find Ski, who conquered the third place ahead of Medzevic and Fusco. This is the order in which the pilots closed the first lap of the race. Marcel Zisco, totally oblivious for the hardship of the wet track, increases his advantage on his opponents. Behind him, a heart-stopping duel is taking place. Skid and Midzovic, in fact, keep on overtaking each other after every bend. Due to a contact, Abruzzi is out of the podium positions after a start from second place. He is now in 7th at the end of the first lap. Meanwhile, in the seconds before the final part of the second lap, Makar Midzovic spins his kart during his umpteenth attempt to overcome Skid, thus giving the 4th spot in the rankings to Giuseppe Fusco, who was right behind him. So, at the end of the second lap, Zisco's advantage increases visibly. His Tony kart seems to fly over the water thanks to the effective driving style of the Polish driver. In second place, the Spaniard Vidales can't do anything but chase the shadow of Zisco, while Skid follows him from far away, 2 seconds behind. The third lap of the race is a confirmation of the top positions. The back alleys of the group are having a hard time to close the gap, especially because the leading group seems to be water skiing, giving the ridiculous speed and maneuverability they are showing. During laps 4 and 5, Marchei Zisco continues to grind fast laps that take his advantage on the Spaniard Vidales to about 5 seconds. In turn, Vidales has no problem in fending off the weak assaults of Skid. The latter is in third position, while behind him we can find Mattia Müller, Nicola Abruzzi and Giuseppe Fusco, who are trying to recover the race in an attempt to recover the 4th and 5th position in the standings. The actual pacing of the race makes dreaming of anything more than 4th position a hard-to-reach success. Even if the podium's positions are frozen and hard to reach, the comeback by Luigi Coluccio is nonetheless worth mentioning. This young driver managed to get the 8th position after a start from the 20th spot. Even better than him, Nigel De Sanctis was able to end the race in 11th place after a start from the 29th. This only goes to show the level of entertainment that such an event can generate. The latest twist comes from the beginning of the last lap, when Nicola Abruzzi comes in contact with Fusco, losing 4 positions. The last lap for Maciej Zisco is a real triumph, mainly thanks to the 6+ seconds gap on the second driver. A well-deserved victory for a flawless race. Under the checker flag, Zisco, followed by Vidales and Skid. On the podium, the 3 young protagonists seem even younger than what they are. In fact, the massive size of the trophies they are handling dwarfs them in comparison. And while on the podium the awarding ceremony draws to an end, the KF pilots are ready on the grid. The karts of this category are single speed and can put out about 40 horsepower. The starting grid for the first final of the season sees the pole position of the Polish Karol Baz on Tony kart. At his side, the English Tom Joyner on Zanardi. In the second row we can find the Russian Nikita Mazepin on Tony kart, flanked by the Danish Niklas Nielsen for Cosmic. Alessio Lorandi, representing the home factions of Italian pilots, is in 4th row. 15 exciting laps to go before a winner of the first final can be determined. The asphalt is wet, forcing the pilots to choose wet tires. When the lights turn off, Karol Baz and Nikita Mazepin get in the lead. But after the first bend, Tom Joyner pops up in front of everyone. At the end of the straight, Baz flanks Joyner and passes him, while the latter spins around and his kart stops silently by the side of the track. At the third bend, the Indian Daruvala spins out too, losing several positions. Meanwhile, Karol Baz is pushing hard to try and gain distance from his rivals. The Polish driver manages to put more than a second between him and the Nielsen-Ilott duo, who are strenuously fighting for the second position, thus favoring the escape of Baz. The head of the race moves quickly to the end of the first lap, which confirms the Polish driver 1.3 seconds ahead of Niklas Nielsen, Callum Ilott, Nikita Mazepin and the Dutchman von Leeuwen. In the second lap, the Polish driver shows his impressive focus and his determination to permanently remove the pursuers, led by the Great Nielsen, who is in turn chased by the fast Ilott. The attempts by Baz are indeed facilitated by the intense duel between these two pilots for the second position. During the second lap, the two will exchange positions until Callum Ilott pulls an overtake on Nielsen's Cosmic. Meanwhile, behind them, the Russian Mazepin and the Dutch von Leeuwen approach them and attack both the second and the third position. At the end of the second lap, the advantage of Karol Bas amounts to a solid 2.1 seconds. Behind him, Elliott is pushing like crazy to try and bridge the gap, while the third position revolves around the duel between Nicklas Nielsen and Nikita Mazepin, who sticks to him like a shadow, ready to exploit every weak spot. Mazepin's driving is less composed than Nielsen's though. More than once, in fact, the Russian driver risks losing his fourth position in favor of the Dutch von Leeuwen. During the third lap though, Nielsen brakes before the chicane and is hit by Mazepin, who was glued to his Cosmic. Nielsen loses his calm, but the Russian does not manage to pass him. At the end of the third lap, the advantage of Karol Bas remains unchanged, while behind him, Callum Ilott remains unfalteringly distant. At the same time, the challenge for third place is still open, and the Dutch von Leeuwen is always ready to exploit his opponent's faltering. At the end of the fifth lap, Karol Bas chalks down the fastest lap of the race, his lead on Ilott more than 2.5 seconds. The Polish seems to be willing to annihilate any hope the British might still be harboring for the first position. Bas's driving style is concise and elegant, and he is able to show his best on his track. Even during the sixth lap, the clock keeps comforting Karol Bas, upping his advantage to 3.2 seconds. More surprisingly still, the Polish driver knows of the wide gulf which divides him from his opponent, but nonetheless floors the accelerator and keeps his focus high, while his style does not falter. During the 9th of 15 laps, the work done on the track by Karol Bas is compensated by the divide, reaching an impossible 4.5 seconds. At the same time, Martin van Leeuwen has a problem and loses position, thus leaving the Russian Nikita Mazepin the task of defending against the attacks of Nicklas Nielsen, who was just handed the third position. The rain keeps on falling on the international track of Naples, encouraging Karol Bas to maintain the position without pushing any further. The success in the first final of the season is just behind the corner, and the checker flag formalizes the triumph of Karol Bas, followed by Callum Ilott and Nikita Mazepin.
Yeah, the second victory in this year, so we are very happy for this moment. And yeah, it was difficult condition also in the pre-final and final. Rain a lot. After the start in the final, I take the gap and then I push a little bit, so Ilott don't catch me. And yeah, the speed was perfect. Fantastic work with Tony Kart, and thank you for my family, and we make very good job with my team.
The podium celebrates the protagonist of the KF class, while the KF junior pilots are ready to race the first final of the season. From the pole position, the English Daniel Ticktum is sitting comfortably in his Zanardi, ready to fight for victory. Same goes for the Russian Matei Maslov on Tony Kart, that closes the front row. In the second row, we found the Belgian Benjamin Lessans starting on his Cosmic, and Leonardo Lorandi, ready to show the prowess of his Tony Kart. 12 laps to go before the end of the first final of the season, and we know they will be all very heart-wrecking. When the engines start roaring, a flash start from Leonardo Lorandi brings the Italian pilot to lead the race from the first bend. It is very hard to efficiently brake here due to extreme condition of the tracks, but Lorandi manages to hold his ground and to show the track who's boss. The circuit is almost unusable due to heavy rains and to the formation of puddles in certain points of the track. In the meantime, Lorandi's lead is challenged by the British Ticktum and Ahmed. After an extreme first lap, Lorandi and Ticktum manage to break apart from the rest of the pilots and start a lone duel to earn the tip of the mountain. After almost every bend, Lorandi looks behind him to see where his opponents are. The track's conditions are hard to tolerate, and keeping a high pace is nearly impossible for both of the leading young drivers. Behind the two leading pilots, we find the English Enam Ahmed, who, While not being able to keep up with the pace of the first two, he is still able to retain the third position ahead of the Belgian Lessons, the English Futrell, the Belgian Raspatelli and the German Beckmann. The challenge between Lorandi and Ticktum is extremely entertaining, while both drivers have to perceive both the difficulties that the track presents and at the same time hold off the rival to either keep the lead or earn it with teeth and nail. During the fourth lap, the pressure by Daniel Ticktum grows more difficult to sustain, even if Lorandi proves to be made of a special resilient material. In fact, at the beginning of the fifth lap, he is hit by Ticktum but manages to keep his cool and fend off his attacks without losing his trajectory. During the sixth lap, right after a sharp bend, Daniel Ticktum manages to flank Lorandi, and two karts gallivant for some seconds on the grass on the side of the track. Lorandi's Tony kart loses speed and the Italian is forced to leave his position to Ticktum, who takes the lead of the race. It takes a few meters for Lorandi to resume the race at normal speed, and in doing so he almost loses his second place to Ahmed. Lorandi eventually manages to keep his second place, but in the meantime Ticktum has disappeared in the hills and is now almost impossible to challenge. No irregularities are detected in the replay of the maneuver. Therefore, Ticktum ends up winning the first final of the season in the Supermaster series, more than 4 seconds ahead of Leonardo Lorandi, followed by Enam Ahmed in third place. On the podium, the joy of Ticktum's face is in stark contrast with the disappointment shown by Leonardi. But waiting 15 days will give the Italian a chance for revenge. Meanwhile, the grid is slowly being populated by the KZ drivers, almost ready for the start. They are all international veterans and worthy opponents. The high driving level will surely give a hell of a show. The pole position goes to the Dutch Bas Lammers, a mad dasher that drives FK. At his side, there is the Tony Kart champion Marc Cardigot. The second row is composed by two drivers, just as aggressive as the first two. The French Kozlinski on Intrepid and the Belgian Rick Dreesen on Zanardi. In the third row, we find the English Benjamin Hanley on Hard Grand Prix and the Italian Paolo De Conto behind the wheel of a Birel. 15 are gonna be the laps before the crowning of the champion of the track, while the rain has stopped but the track is still drenched. When the race starts, Bas Lammers has no problem conquering the lead, rushing down the long straight. Behind him, the unleashed pack with Ardigot, who is unable to find the right spaces to overtake his opponents and end up losing positions. During the frenzy of the first bends, the Prague kart of Jonathan Thonon pops into existence, after a start which was straight out of the karting handbook. He is now ahead of the French Kozlinski and of the Italians Paolo De Conto and Marco Ardigot. With no one in front of him, Bas Lammers has no problems in dealing with his first position. He knows that if he is able to gain at least a couple of seconds on his opponents, the victory will be way easier to snatch. At the end of the first lap, Bas Lammers is 0.7 seconds ahead of Thonon, and Kozlinski is third, 1.6 seconds away. Behind him, we find Zanchetta and Iglesias, coming in before Ardigot, who, notwithstanding the unfortunate departure, is still alive and kicking. When the second lap starts, in fact, he attacks and overcomes Iglesias, jumping up in 5th position, and immediately attacking Zanchetta. In the meantime, Thonon keeps on chasing Bas Lammers, trying to breach his defenses. When they pass the finish line of the second lap, the stopwatch confirms that the advantage of Lammers remains to 0.7 seconds, while the menacing shadow of Marco Ardigot's Tony Kart looms in their wakes from the 4th position. Ardigot is unstoppable and manages to pass Kozlinski before the seconds, while Bas Lammers finally manages to open a longer than 1 second gap ahead of Thonon. At the finish line of the third lap, Bas Lammers is grateful to the Lords of Time when they show him that the gap is now 1.6 seconds. In the meantime, Ardigot is getting closer and closer, after collecting the fastest lap of the race thus far, and Tonon needs to start fearing him. It will take Ardigo 4 laps to bring his Tony Kart in the wake of Tonon's Prague, but when this happens, a few corners are more than enough for Ardigo to study his opponent and overtake him without any possibility of a reply. Now Ardigo is in second position, there are 7 laps to go and Bas Lammers is 5 seconds away. During lap 8, Ardigo vaporizes 1 second of the gap, while his team rejoices and Tonon is overtaken by Kozlinski. Five laps to go and the advantage has gone down to 3.8 seconds. 4 laps to go and the gap has been further reduced by another second. Ardigo seems to have an additional set of wheels on his kart. Bas Lammers can start feeling Ardigo's breath down his neck. 3 laps to go, and now Lammers decide to push forward like there was no tomorrow, managing to keep more than 2 seconds of opening between the two contenders. And thus Bas Lammers is the first one to be greeted by the flapping checker flag, followed 2 seconds after by the Italian driver. Notwithstanding his long suffering throughout the different races, Bas Lammers nailed it. Ardigo shines for his grit and determination and his awesome recoup, while the third step of the podium goes to Kozlinski. This is the last podium for this event, the first of the Supermaster Series 2014, only the start for a season which will be over the top.
From the beginning of the week we had many problems to find the right setup with the engine and with the chassis. We worked really hard, so much as possible, and we didn't expect also the good result of the last heat, because yesterday in the last heat we proved something, and the chassis and the engine were proving way better. And then from that moment, this morning, we drove in the dry, so it was not so bad, but we didn't expect the rain, because the rain normally should arrive at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but the rain comes earlier, and we had to change everything again. And in the pre-final it was already a really good feeling, and then we make a little changement for the final, and in the final the Formula K chassis and the Texas engine was really strong, and I could push from the beginning of the race to the end. And I'm really happy to get the victory with the team together. They all did a great job. I think it is a really good result for the team. It is also an extra boost, motivation for the team to get again, to prove better, everything. Let's keep going and try to get the victory in all the races.
At the end of this enticing week, the first ranking of the Supermaster Series 2014 confirms that in the Mini 60, Marcei Cisco leads with 59 points, while in second place with 42 points, Makar Mizovic. David Vidales third with 40 points. In KF Junior, the English Daniel Ticktum commands with 80 points. In second place with 50 points we can find Leonardo Lorandi. Third with 38 points is Matej Maslov. In the KF, the Polish Karol Baz leads the standing with 80 points. Second place is tied between the Russian Nikita Mazepin and the English Callum Ilott with 40 points. And they are followed by the Danish Niklas Nielsen with 35 points. In KZ, the Dutch Bas Lammers leads the standings with 80 points. In second place, Marc Ardigo with 60 points, and in third place with 40 points, the French Armand Kozlinski. The second round of the Supermaster Series will take place on the Seven Lakes track in Castelletto di Branduzzo between the 10th and the 13th of April.
Russia.